Catch Thom Hartman on Free Speech TV last night?
Yeah, it was great. They always cover the really tough issues other networks don't.
And their programming is so diverse and fearless. It really makes me think.
Exactly. It's like they plant the seeds and the dialogue grows from there.
A dialogue on democracy.
Powered by their viewers and commercial-free.
That's information I can act on.
And trust.
That's Free Speech TV on Dish Network, Channel 9415, and DirecTV, Channel 348.
Hello, I'm Thom Hartman in Washington, D.C., and here's what's coming up tonight on The Big Picture. Occupy the courts! Across America, people took to their local courthouses to protest the 2-month anniversary of the Supreme Court's crazed Citizens United decision. A man behind this movement to put an end to the bizarre idea that corporations are people and money is speech. David Cobb joins me for tonight's Conversations with Great Minds. And from Wisconsin to the halls of Congress and our nation's heartland, American citizens have had quite a week standing up for democracy. We'll touch on how corporations were dealt a big blow this week and ask if this signals a new wave of public backlashes in tonight's Big Picture Rumble. Today, in over 150 cities across America, demonstrators rallied in front of federal courthouses and even in front of the Supreme Court here in Washington, D.C. to protest the 2-year anniversary of the Citizens United decision. This day of action encouraged people to fight back against the radical ruling of the Supreme Court that declared corporations are people and money is speech, a ruling that has put our democracy up for sale to the highest bidder. I had the honor of speaking at the rally in front of the Supreme Court earlier today.
The Supreme Court said implicitly in their Citizens United decision that they were expanding freedom, that we should have the freedom to hear what these corporate persons have to say. This was the main rationale of the Citizens United decision. But in fact, the consequence of that is that the freedom of real persons has been diminished while the freedom of these giant corporations has been enhanced. Franklin Roosevelt.
And rallies like this are translating into real change. This week, Portland, Maine became the latest city in America to pass a resolution calling on Congress to amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United and declare that corporations are not people. Joining a long line of other cities from Los Angeles to Boulder to New York, by the way, that have passed similar resolutions. So for tonight's Conversations with Great Minds, I'm joined by a man who's been instrumental in raising awareness of this issue and organizing today's Occupy the Courts rallies across America, David Cobb. He is a lawyer, political activist, and engaged citizen. He has sued corporate polluters, lobbied elected officials, run for political office himself, and even been arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience. Currently, David is the National Projects Director of Democracy Unlimited, and he's the spokesperson for MoveToAmend.org, the organization that spearheaded today's National Day of Action. Back in 2004, David was the Green Party's candidate for president. Here was David earlier today speaking in front of the Supreme Court.
Corporations are not persons. They do not have inherent inalienable rights. And money is not political speech. And I want to be clear, the Move to Amend Coalition is committed to both doctrines must be abolished. We cannot overturn corporate personhood and still allow wealthy individuals to spend unlimited amounts of money in our elections. Are we right?
Joining me now in the studio for our Conversations with Great Minds tonight is David Cobb. David, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you with us. A little bit about David Cobb, first of all. Where'd you come from? What was your life like, and what brought you into politics and the law?
Well, you know, Tom, I was born in rural poverty in this country. I'm not embarrassed to say I grew up in a house without a flush toilet in San Leon, Texas. And I'll always remember one of the most important lessons that I was taught by my mama. She doesn't remember this story, but I certainly do. I was arguing with my cousin and my brother over a toy. Pretty sure it was a car. And I'll never forget, she got down to our level. She calmed us down. And then she explained, there's 3 of you. 1, 2, 3. There's one toy. So you can either share it or there are other toys we can bring in. But you can't fight over it. Let's learn to share. And you know what, Tom? That made sense to me then. It makes sense to me now. Really, all we have to do is treat each other with respect, learn how to share, learn how to exercise power with one another, and we can have a completely different world.
Yeah, tell that to Mitt Romney. Let's not go there. So, you grew up in a small town in Texas,
yeah.
and I understand you worked worked construction. You were a waiter. You worked your way through college.
I worked my way through college. I worked on shrimp boats. I worked as a waiter. I worked in construction. And I got to say, Tom, early on, even though I was born in poverty, I was a proud American. I really believed in the promise of democracy. I was so proud of the concepts of liberty and justice and equality. And it wasn't until I got to college that I realized, in some respects, I had been lied to, that the country is not operating the way that we were taught, right. The way that we were, that inspired me so much. So
in fact, in many ways, it never has.
And it never has. And that was really what I came to understand. So I have really grappled with how can we make this promise of democracy a reality? Because this really is the country where something as profound, throwing off the king is a big deal. Creating the idea that we the people are sovereign is huge. The problem, Tom, is not in the framework of what we were taught. The problem has been we never actually implemented it because only rich white men were actually legally persons. And that's why the whole notion of who is a legal person has been the central fight for social justice in this country. Think of it this way. The best lens to look at American history is as a series of struggles by actual human beings to be legal persons with rights protected by our Constitution.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And which brings us to this concept of corporate personhood, which didn't really just start yesterday or 2 years ago tomorrow with Citizens United.
No, it didn't. And let's be clear. So corporate personhood is a shorthand for the idea that a corporation as an entity can claim inherent and inalienable rights. And I want to be clear. Your viewers, me, you as human beings, we have sacrosanct rights. The U.S. Supreme Court is supposed to merely interpret our Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. It's the codification of the social contract. We, the people, have all of the inherent power, but we delegate a certain power to our elected representatives who are charged with the responsibility of making laws. But the one thing that the lawmaker can never do is to actually pass laws that violate our rights, because those rights are inherent, they're inalienable, they're sacrosanct. And that's the nut of why it is outrageous for concentrated capital in the form of a corporation to claim that they have some sort of inherent inalienable rights. Corporations are created by state charters. They are created through the process. We, the people, can say what they can or cannot do. And so to allow a corporate lawyer to go into court and overturn democratically enacted laws, whether it's an environmental protection law, a worker safety law, a public health law, or, as most recently in the Citizens United case, campaign finance laws. Laws designed to protect the integrity of our elections. That's what Citizens United did.
Yeah.
And it is a perversion of the promise of a democratic republic.
And this idea of corporate personhood, you can track back, I believe, to the Dartmouth case in 1815. It was the first time, and that was even a foreign corporation. If my recollection is correct, originally it was a British corporation.
Correct.
Dartmouth College versus the state of something.
I forgot. The Dartmouth case, though, in essence, was an effort immediately after the American Revolution. The legislature of New Hampshire had actually said this will now be a completely public school,
right.
And it was in the keeping of the American revolutionary spirit of public. Things are public, and we need engaged citizenry.
Started the University of Virginia as a free college.
Absolutely, and so there was this idea that in order to have a democratic society, you needed engaged, educated citizenry.
Right.
So the idea that Dartmouth was actually going to be privatized as a contract was the first time that the idea began. But of course, as you know, and I got to say, the great book Unequal Protection that you wrote that really delves into the Santa Clara versus Pacific Railway case, that's the first time ever that the idea of a corporation having constitutional rights made its way into the Supreme Court process.
Right,
but not a decision.
Yeah, which was so bizarre, because for so long everybody said, oh yeah, this was decided by the Supreme Court, and it's actually never been decided by the...
Well, not in Santa Clara, and I will confess, in law school that's what we were taught, and we read the head note and just sort of went through. What we do know, though, Tom, is that there have been a series of court cases after Santa Clara where the issue was briefed, it was argued, and not merely acting upon precedent. The court did create the legal doctrine that a corporation is a person, just as surely as the court created the legal doctrine that money is speech. These are not in our Constitution. Certainly no democratic process was engaged in order to reach those conclusions. The court created these ideas out of whole cloth in order to legalize the ability of a small ruling elite to basically hijack our governing structures.
Yeah, and the court itself, ever since Marbury, ever since 1803, has become a small ruling elite. I mean, we basically have 9 black-robed kings down the street here, just a couple blocks from us, who can knock down anything that our democratically elected representatives choose, because of the Marbury case in 1803, when the court took that power out of themselves.
Right.
And they aggressively do it all the time.
And let's just be clear, the Roberts Court is probably the most extreme example of judicial activism we've seen in 100 years from the Supreme Court. I do believe that the court should be used if individual human rights are actually being violated through the democratic process. Thank goodness that we had the court system to be able to fight back against Jim Crow segregation. But that's the point. Those laws violated the inherent inalienable rights of African Americans in the South.
Although you could argue also that Brown v. Board wouldn't have been necessary if the Supreme Court hadn't done,
Plessy versus Ferguson.
Or prior to that,
Dred Scott.
Yeah. So
right. And Tom, that's, I think, underlying really why Move to Amend has been so successful, because we don't take a legal strategy. We understand that real change in this country requires engaged citizens participating in a social movement. It needs to be broad, it needs to be deep, but it also needs to be committed to real change. And that's, I think, what Move to Amend is doing.
Yeah, and in fact, I want to get into Move to Amend. We're going to take a break in just a second. When we come back on the other end of the break, I want to play for you a little clip from a listener to my radio show from a little town outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and what her experience was visiting your website and how it changed her life. So we'll do that when we come right back. More with David Cobb as our Conversations with Great Minds tonight.